of you have explored LinkedIn nearby? Go on into your phones, switch on Bluetooth, LinkedIn, go into Contacts or Network, My Network. There's a tiny little button on the right with a plus sign. Click on that, and that activates LinkedIn nearby. And what that does is people around you, it adds on or recommends. So both people need to have it on, so you can actually add people who are sitting around you. So why don't you try doing that? And while we're talking about communities online, we have somebody very interesting who has a fascinating community that she herself. Open source software is running in every website, every app, every device, nearly every machine in the world, and the creations on the collective efforts of developers worldwide. In our next session, a COO GitHub will discuss the speed at which software is being developed to take your workforce to the new decade and beyond. Erica is Chief Operating Officer, where she leads support and workplace teams. Prior to joining GitHub, she was the COO and founder of Bitnami, where she was instrumental in leading the team's business development of the leading cloud platform providers. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Erica Bresica.
Thank you, and what an honor to follow that incredible panel. And I promise you this wasn't planned, but it was like the perfect setup. So again, I'm Erica Brescia. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of GitHub, and I'm incredibly excited in Mumbai to talk about a topic that I'm deeply passionate about, an interconnected open source community and what it means for your business, and also for the prior conversation, really what it means for the future of India. So I'm sure I don't have to tell this crowd that open source is everywhere. Planes many of us flew here on, it's in the cars that we drive, it's even in pacemakers. In fact, 80 to 90% code in modern software supply chains is open source. And I'll get into why that makes so much sense in a little bit. But first, let's talk about what it means to really build on top of open source. When you source library into your project, you're not just adding code. You're really inviting in a team of developers and essentially giving them commit access to your. But in return, you get to benefit from all the work that they're doing every day, for improvements, to bug fixes, to addressing security vulnerability. But we all still have this image of developers, right? This lone person way in a dark room, you slip pizza, or maybe here in India, you're delicious, under the door, and then out comes code. But in reality, open source is deeply collaborative. A bit about how thousands of developers around the world came together to create a major scientific breakthrough. Hopefully you've all seen this picture by now. It's a picture, the first ever picture of a black hole. And this one is from a galaxy called M87, over 55 light years away. Now, there's no telescope on Earth enough to capture this image alone. So a team of researchers had and use a network of telescopes, collect data, and use software built on open source to produce this image. Hopefully you've all also seen this image, really my favorite from the Event Horizon project. This is Dr. Katie Baum, the lead researchers on the project. And I love this picture because I think we can all relate to this moment. It's that your code passed all of its tests, when all of your hard work just pays off. And I think we can all really relate to this feeling. But it also raises the question, what did it take to get to this point? So at GitHub, we're privileged to have a lot of data on open source. And we wanted to understand not how many people worked on the core team, but given that this was built on top of open source software, how many people contributed to all these that were used to develop the Event Horizon project? How all the dependencies? the number was pretty unbelievable. Over 21,000 people worked on the code to make the Event Horizon project possible. So this project really needed a planet-sized team, and that's the magic of open source. As Dr. Bauman said, her core team of hundreds of developers was really just the tip of the iceberg. There are all these other people that are developing along with you in the community, and we call those community contributors. So it's easy to think that maybe the Event Horizon project was an anomaly, right? Built in Python, it used a lot of high-level libraries. Maybe it's an outlier. Again, at GitHub, we're privileged to have a lot of data on open. So we decided to take a look and sample the top 1,000 open source projects on GitHub and see how many contributors were involved in making them possible. Now, I've been in open source for over 15 years, and even I was shocked by this number. 74,000 people on average are developing the top open source projects. So lots of folks in open source. Where are they coming from? The answer is everywhere. This is real data. Over the course of a month, we captured over 100 million contributions on GitHub. And as you can see, India is incredibly bright, so I think that's something you should all be proud of. An applause, it's incredible. So let's take a look at how many people contributed in that month, but what does the growth in open source in India look like? Between 2018 and 2019, we saw 2% growth in developers just in India on GitHub. We saw 75% growth in new repositories. And what that means is really 1% growth in the number of projects on GitHub in just 1 year. And we saw 500% growth in the use of private repo-produced free private repositories. Excuse me. This growth is fantastic, and it's off an incredibly large user base. GitHub has over 40 million registered users and growing, and India is number 3 in terms in the country on the platform. So India is clearly already in open source. But what does this mean for your companies, and how does it business? Well, first, as we talked about, you have 1 million developers every year who need to be involved in best practices. They need to understand how development works. And getting involved in the open source community is one way to do that. Also, by leveraging open source, you can focus your core development activities on what your company in the market, and that's in the digital experience. Why does this matter? It's because digital disruptors are entering every market and they're winning on customer experience. The competitive landscape is moving from physical assets, for example, 1 million rooms, to digital goods. Airbnb has no rooms, but same valuation. And we're seeing this in industries across the spectrum, from automotive to banking and so on. These companies, you don't have to take my word for it, these companies are winning in terms and total stock returns. And they're doing it because they're focusing on giving the best possible experience to their customers. They do that by using data-driven decision-making and things like A/B testing and feature flags to quickly iterate and feedback in constant pursuit of delivering the best possible customer experience. In getting into the numbers, we're seeing half of software companies are shipping daily, and another 25 shipping a few times a week. The average amount of time between customers has gone from an average of 140 days in 2008, 20 in 2018. So how are companies doing this? Magic. They've developed processes and cultures that allow them to quickly to roll back things that are not working. And they have modern software supply chains in place them safely use and consume open source. So hopefully I've made my point. And the way that we build software is incredibly quickly. And keeping developers skilled in modern DevOps best practices is the key to one customer experience. And that brings us to the great challenge and opportunity in India. As I mentioned, you have over 1 million developers graduating every year. Really incredible. But in order to bring the best developers into your workforce, to adopt modern tools and best practices and invest in connecting with the open source, because that's what those developers want. Excited to be here launching GitHub officially in India today for the first time. Incredibly vibrant community that you have here. And like you, supporting the future of Indian developers. And we're going to be doing that in a number of ways, but I'd like to talk a little bit about education because of all these new students every year. First, we have something called the GitHub Student Developer Pack that offers $200,000 in free benefits to students to help them get software development projects started. And we've also partnered with Major League Hacking to extend our Hack in India. And we'll now be delivering $1,000 grants to organizations that want to run hackathons, again, to bring that next generation into the software development world. So thank you so much for being here. Excuse me, one more thing I forgot. By we expect to have 100 million developers on the GitHub platform. And the number of new graduates you have coming onto the scene and the pace of growth in India, I expect India to be a huge part of getting us to the 100 million developers number. So again, thank you so much for having me today, and we look forward to working with you all to modernize Indian development. Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, a huge round of applause for the conversation that was.
Sorry, this is a little different than US Tech conferences.
We need to say thank you.
Ah, thank you.